Okay, and just in case anybody came late, today's meeting is being recorded, and that recording will be posted publicly, just so you know. Feel free to make any comments you really want or withhold those based on that information. For those who missed it, actually, sorry, I'll wait one more second. Hello. Sorry, just in case my voice didn't carry, I just want to let you know that today's meeting is being recorded, and that recording will be posted publicly. Just so you know. So sorry, my name is Eva Vaughn. For those who missed it earlier, I'm the MIPA analyst assigned to review this project, created to discuss the Unified Parkway Industrial Development Project, which has been assigned EEA file number 16593. For the sort of overview of the MIPA process, for those who are less familiar with it, the MIPA process applies a project that meet or exceed a MIPA review threshold, which generally relates to environmental impacts and are regulatorily defined, and also involve a state agency action. In this case, the first phase of the project, phase 1, which is primarily the focus of the EENF or expanded ENF filing for this project, does exceed an EIR threshold, specifically the one related to the creation of 10 or more acres of impervious area, but it itself, phase 1, does not require a state agency action. It's anticipated that the full build of the project will require a MassDOT access permit, which would be the state agency action in this case, but the phase 1 traffic impacts are not anticipated to require that permit. So MIPA requires essentially that state agencies evaluate the environmental consequences of their actions prior to them being taken. It's not itself a permitting process. We don't approve or deny projects. It's really a mechanism to find out about or ask questions about and learn more about the existing conditions associated with the project site, exactly what is being proposed, the impacts associated with that, and any actions that have been taken to avoid, minimize, or if necessary mitigate the damage to the environment. In this case, a special review procedure, or SRP, has been requested by the proponent that would guide the future review of this project, the full build, as it were, and would allow phase 1 to proceed independently. The future filing that would address the full build would address the cumulative impacts of the project. It wouldn't just be focused on the second half, and the mitigation commitments would be reflected for the mitigation for the project as a whole. In addition to today's meeting, and I also want to note just that there was formally a remote consultation session that was held for this project on September 9th. During that meeting, we went over a lot of the project aspects in detail, such as the greenhouse gas emissions, etc. Today it's going to be a little bit more of an overview, just because of the sort of data we have available in the group and the site. So it will be an overview of the project, but maybe not as much discussion. If you haven't received the expanded ENF, the filing that discusses the project in detail, you are more than welcome to request that. It's a public document. You can request that document by emailing me. Once again, my email is eva.vaughn, VAUGHAN, @mass.gov. You can also email the project contact, which is identified on the MIPA Environmental Monitor, which you should be able to find by Googling MIPA Environmental Monitor, mass.gov. It should show up. And in addition to today's meeting, there's also an opportunity to submit comments on the project. The comment period deadline for this project is this Friday. And again, please, written comments are really the best way to get and submit information, concerns about the project. Those can be emailed directly to me or submitted through the MIPA public comment portal. The certificate and independently the formalized SRP, I guess I should note that the draft SRP is included as a last appendix on that filing. It may be edited to some extent by the Secretary of EEA, but both the finalized SRP and independently the certificate on this phase of the project will be issued on September 30th and posted publicly to the Environmental Monitor with any comments that were submitted on the project the following business day. So I believe that's Monday, October 3rd.
Eva, how can you sign up to get notice when the Environmental Monitor is being issued? Or
I guess, unfortunately, I'll say that if you write your email down on that, I will email you personally when it's posted to the Environmental Monitor, because the only other way to sign up is to sign up for every Environmental Monitor in perpetuity, and I'm sure a lot of people don't want that kind of email spam. So,
I got a question.
Yes.
You went through that quite good, but you're using all the initials. I don't know what they are.
Fair enough, sorry.
What's that mean?
MEPA is the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act office.
Okay.
We are primarily concerned with reviewing environmentally impactful projects, but again, we only see projects if they exceed one of our review thresholds, which generally relate to environmental impacts, and also involve a state agency action, which is typically a permit or funding by a state agency. In this case, the full build would require an access permit by the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, MassDOT. That would be our state agency action. And while there's additional thresholds that will anticipate to be exceeded by the full build of the project, because those details aren't formalized yet, I can't really say what all thresholds exceeded by the full build would be. For phase one in particular, the threshold exceeded is the generation or the creation of 10 or more acres of impervious surface. It's really a public mechanism to evaluate the environmental impacts of the project, but it itself is not a permitting process. So with that, I'm going to hand over the project team to Brad. Oh, sorry, yeah.
One more time, can you just go through the scope of what this review is? I'm a little confused.
Yeah, absolutely.
Phase one, building one,
Yes,
with future actions to be taken in connection with,
the full build. So
and what triggers the full build considerations?
it would have to be reviewed through MEPA prior to the access permit being issued by MassDOT.
So having gone through planning for buildings for phase one and two, or
So
phase,
basically, we generally encourage folks to file with us when they're about 60% design, just because a lot of our review is quantifying very specifically environmental impact. And so we know through this filing sort of the exact greenhouse gas emissions associated with the phase one warehouse, which is just under 350,000 square feet, and the amount of impervious surface that will be created, and the extent of the work site, so the extent of land alteration. The rest of the project, that sort of second phase, that will be subject to a future filing. It's not at this stage of review that you could really quantify those impacts to the extent that we require through MEPA. So phase one, as proposed by the draft SRP, which is still subject to review and sort of editing by the Secretary of EEA, would allow phase one itself to proceed to construction, but the rest of the project could not proceed to construction until it was reviewed through MEPA.
so building one, current scope of review.
Yes.
Prior to the commencement of any construction activities on building two would require additional.
Yes, absolutely.
And there'd be notices to the groups that, in terms of how this is going to advance?
Yes, I would say I need to look at the specifics of the draft SRP, which is the special review procedure, which dictates how that future review would take place and what it should contain. I've suggested to the Secretary that SRP should require anyone who commented on this project to be noticed of the future filing, which I guess would just plug as another reason to submit comments on this project, is that you would likely receive notice of that future filing, because we really don't have time limits as far as when that future filing should be published, so it's not like there's a 6-month deadline. And so I find that would probably be the best way to stay on top of when it is actually filed.
Our town meetings at the Planning Board and Conservation Commission, does MEPA review those to understand kind of the history and evolution of the project, the decisions that have been made locally?
We aren't really, MEPA jurisdiction doesn't generally extend to local regulations. My best example of this is that bordering vegetated wetland, we consider the state has jurisdiction over direct impacts to bordering vegetated wetland, but your local conservation commission would be concerned with buffer zone impacts, whereas we don't really have jurisdiction over that area. So I can't, unless, a conservation commission, it's not uncommon for a conservation commission to submit project comments on a project, but we generally only review comments if they're submitted by those bodies. We don't really review the local regulatory decisions just because it's outside of scope of our review.
It's just that there were a lot of questions raised in connection with those meetings, and to the extent it would save a lot of time and people asking redundant questions about the same issues.
I do appreciate that. Unfortunately, we're just sort of limited with the scope of review. Yes, please.
The deadline is Friday.
This Friday, yes.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. Why is it we're having a meeting like this at this stage of the game, not a month ago? So if there was anything that people wanted to research and ask questions, they have no time to do that.
There was a public meeting held on September 9th. The offer in connection with that meeting was that a site walk would be scheduled upon request.
Was it published?
Yes, it was published. It was sent to both Sutton and Millbury boards of public health, conservation commissions, planning board, and also the select board. And it's noticed publicly in the environmental monitor as well. I'm unfortunately, if you aren't on that list and if the town didn't notice it separately, there is also projects are required to publish notice in a local newspaper when they submit it to NEPA. So for this project, it was noticed in the local newspaper
Is gone.
when it was submitted.
Well, the Grammar Gazette isn't, but local news is almost non-existent.
Unfortunately, it wasn't posted on the town website until maybe 1 or 2 days before.
That's what
Yes.
the town did.
So there's no butters.
Could I just ask for a point?
Not required from NEPA. Sorry.
Can I get one point of clarification and one question about jurisdiction? One, we're on building 3, correct? We're not on building 1 right here. As phased.
Yes.
Okay,
Phase
very good.
1 is specific to building 3. That
Only
confused
Okay,
me. Sorry
yeah,
about that.
thank you. Jurisdictional question, does MEPA have any authority over the general water tables? Because on property there is a well that's utilized by Wilkes Water District.
Yes, the Zone 1 wellhead protection area.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is required to be delineated on all of our project site plans, and we do generally consider, Mass DEP might look at potential impacts from stormwater to that. We do consider it a resource, but I can't say that there's a threshold directly related to alteration, but in general, you're not allowed to alter anything within that Zone 1 wellhead protection area anyways. But we do look at those public drinking water impacts. So I do want to note there's going to be opportunity for questions just at the end of this on the project. And maybe at this point we can go over just sort of a high-level overview.
Sure. All right. I think most of you probably already know me from some of the local meetings, but my name is Matt Pekarsky. I'm the Director of Construction and Development with the Craft Group here on behalf of UGPGRE Sutton LLC, the applicant on this project. So, as Eva noted, we did have a more detailed conversation on September 9th that was focused on all kind of the major points of the expanded ENF that was filed. And then this meeting was requested, so we're here today to talk about what I kind of think of the more tangible things that you can see and touch out here. So to that end, we'll give an overview of the project. It's going to correspond to the handouts that you provided here. We're going to give an overview of the project. We'll talk specifically about the Phase 1 project and kind of get you referenced and orientated. And then we also included a figure that shows some of the resource areas that are specific to the Phase 1 area here. So with that said, I'll jump right into, actually one other thing I want to note too is from a general construction, obviously you can see the activities that are going on here. All this activity, for instance, over here, the screening of the loam and whatnot is in support of the already approved Unified Parkway, which is under construction now as well, to obviously support the development. But just wanted to point that out in case anyone was wondering what was going on. If you want to refer to that first slide, I think it's figure 1.6. It has a general overview of the site itself. So by way of reference, as you're looking at that, on page left is generally to the north, so it's pointing in that direction, kind of to your backs here. Boston Road is bounding the site here on the south. Providence Road kind of on the northwest corner, which is up beyond these trees over here. Obviously, it's a very big site. It's 440 plus acres of land. Basically, the parcel was comprised by us purchasing 3 primary parcels. One was the original aggregate parcel, which is about 330 acres of land. About 36 or so acres of that was within Millbury. The second piece that we acquired, which is actually what we're standing on now, is the former Worcester Sand and Gravel parcel, which is generally up in this area here. That was roughly 46 or so acres. And then the last piece of the puzzle, as I like to call it, was about the 26 or so acres that we were the successful bidder on the RFP that was issued for the town for the purchase of their land. That was in the kind of in between the two pieces. So there's some other small out parcels as well that we've since acquired, but generally speaking, those 3 comprise the contiguous parcel that is defining the project area that we're here to talk about. I mentioned access to the site. Again, on that map, you can see Providence Road kind of up onto the page top, and then Boston Road is in the lower right-hand corner. Boston Road is intended to be the primary access to the site. The Unified Parkway construction I just mentioned is going to basically bisect the site in generally a north to south fashion, connecting from Boston Road all the way up to Providence Road. It's I think just over a mile long in overall length, and it will serve as the access to the different lots that are on the site itself. The primary access to the site for certainly all truck traffic, and then generally speaking, the majority of any employee-related traffic will be through the Boston Road driveway entrance down here at Unified Parkway. And again, that's because it's approximate location to 146, which is, generally speaking, going to be the primary access for both Unified and any potential future tenants that would be in here, specifically to Building 1. The site itself, as you can kind of see, it's generally speaking a large. They're all gravel pit operations over here, dating back to, as far as I could see, anyways, to 1938. It's the first photo I could find. But generally speaking, the whole area has been mined to the extent possible as it relates to the gravel operations that were here, for the different the variety of different landowners that were here. The majority of the site is previously disturbed. I don't have it in this packet here, but generally speaking, the site's been subdivided into technically 9 different parcels, but the 3 parcels the 3 biggest ones correspond to the 3 buildings. So lot 1 is building 1 on the north side. Lot 2 is over in that direction, which is building 2. Lot 3 is what we're standing on now, which is building 3, which is part of the phase 1 project that we're before MEPA for right now. The site, generally speaking, the previously disturbed areas are, for the most part, have been, I'll call it, restored as part of the gravel operation and the previous owners. They were loamed and seeded with things like the invasive species here that we have. The Russian olive is pretty predominant throughout here, as well as the areas that there are a good portion of areas that were not disturbed previously, and that's pretty much behind us on the western side of the site. That area is zoned residential and is not contemplated for any of the development plans that we're looking at as part of this filing with MEPA. From a resource perspective, there are a handful of wetland areas, wetland resources that were delineated by Ecotech, our consultant on the project. Those have all been shown on the maps. On the map that you have before you, it's kind of the lightly green shaded areas, show the different resource areas, whether it's bordering, vegetated, isolated. There's all different categories that are in there. In addition, on the, I'll call it, I guess it's the eastern, southeastern side of the site, here is Cold Spring Brook, which runs generally in a northerly direction out towards the Blackstone River. Again, not an area that we're impacting or touching as part of this project. If you flip to the next slide, the next figure in your packet here. Actually, before you do that, if you look down, just by way of reference on the previous map, the Phase 1 project is outlined in red on that, so you can get a form of reference of where we are on the whole site. The next slide, the next figure in the packet has the actual project site area shown on it, which is the Phase 1 project. Locally known also as Building 3 for the site plan approval. So as you're looking at that plan, this stake that's right behind us right here is actually the southwest corner of the building. So the building is, generally speaking, going in this kind of northerly direction, running pretty much parallel to these power lines. And so if you look on the plan, we can point it out and go around if you can't get yourself referenced, but if you hold the plan with the page left, generally that way, that's pointing north. And building 3, the corner is right here, is where this would be proposed. The access to the to building 3 would come through a road that's going to come off of Unified Parkway. We actually walked in on that road basically, and then that will continue behind the building and wrap around. The building would sit here in the middle, employee parking on the north side, different obviously site improvements, parking lots for trailers, things of that nature, and then obviously the required stormwater management features and signage and landscaping and things of that nature would be included as part of it. Yes.
100-foot buffer. What's it going to look like when we're standing at the corner of the building in the employee parking area looking out?
So this hill here is going to come down, and I believe a small portion of that comes down, but generally speaking, most of this vegetation here, the power lines are just on the other side of this. The power that generally stays.
And the brook's over on the other side too, right?
Yes.
To some extent?
But we're outside of the buffer zones. We're outside of the 200-foot river protection zone.
So this high elevation might be preserved?
More than likely, yes. Yes.
That's a good fact, though, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Buffer's not.
Yep. Thank you. Let's see here.
I apologize.
That's all right.
I know we sort of covered this at the September 9th meeting, but the area of wetland restoration or buffer zone restoration that's taking place, is that associated with phase 1, or is with that the entirety of the later phases of the project?
The filing itself was in connection or for buildings 2 and 3.
Gotcha.
So technically, I guess, yes, it is considered part of it.
I guess I just mean not like adjacent to the phase 1 building.
I believe Scott.
Yeah, those areas are not near this first phase.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
They're closer to building 2, which is in the future phase.
The impacts were on that side, and all of the mitigation, with the exception of a very small piece of it over here, is on lot 2 as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I guess I should have mentioned this too on the previous slide too. Just to put a little context, I know Eva mentioned this. Obviously, we're talking about the phase 1 project right now. As it relates to the bigger development, I said this on the 9th. We've said it at the previous local meetings as well. Unified's intent is to use Building 3, the phase 1 project, for their use. Same with Building 2. Building 1, as we know, is still, it's a future use for a third-party tenant, is yet to be defined. Unfortunately, we don't have everybody ready to sign on the dotted line. We'd love to have that be the case, but to that end, we have anticipated uses of it, but it will be built out. So as you're seeing it on the plans here now, it's very conceptual. I mean, in terms of, because we just don't know who the end user is at this point. We understand and we know what the use will be, but we don't necessarily know all the specifics of it. So I just want to point that out, and that's why it's noted on there too as a conceptual building layout. I think that's all we really had for the third slide on there. It's a little harder to see on this one. It shows, this was part, again, these are right out of the expanded ENF filing that we submitted. It does show the resource areas on there. They're highlighted in the red. So those are the buffer zones specific to the wetlands and to Cold Spring Brook that are on this side. Again, we included them as reference. It's kind of hard because the building 3 is not shown on that map, but it's the same exact area that you're looking at as the second page that's in there relative to the, but suffice to say that the building 3 impacts to those, we don't have any impacts to those buffer zones other than a very small portion of it on this, on the southern end over here.
And where is the archaeological historic pieces that were mentioned in the filing? Where are those located? Because I thought there was a slight corner of this phase 1 that was going to be impacting.
So, David, you want to speak to this? Or?
Yeah, so there were, when we, as part of the filing that you do with MIPA, our team, they look at every single kind of environmental area where the project could impact. By the way, I'm David Liberdoni. I'm the attorney for the project. I've seen a lot of you at public meetings before. As part of that, kind of canvassing of all the different environmental areas, one thing that did pop up was there were a couple, I think 2 or 3 archaeological areas identified. 2 of them are away on the north site that is going to require further investigation. Mass Historic Commission has been identified of our filing, and they will respond with comments as to further details. They're sort of the keeper of the records for these archaeological research that they've done maybe previously. With respect to the one I think that you're identifying, there's an area that's on the opposite side of Boston Road, right where we entered the site. Kind of where it's plotted, they're kind of plotted in geometric squares. One of the corners goes over the other side of Boston Road, but onto where the entrance is. All that area is previously disturbed before, but I think Mass Historic will identify if there's any further investigation needed in that area.
Out of curiosity, the number for the sites was 19 WR 893. Where did that get found? So many of us are on the Historical Society or Commission, and just a Google search isn't turning it up. There was a search of Macris, and it doesn't show you archaeological sites.
Only historical sites and assets are published publicly by the Massachusetts Historical Commission, MHC. Archaeological sites are not released publicly, I think just primarily because of their sensitive nature.
Okay.
And so that is those configured of just that tag basically is MHC's internal documentation. I can't really say what those represent. Unfortunately, I'm just not as familiar with how they document those sites. But
So that would have to be a direct call to Mass Historic then if you wanted to identify exactly what spots or what resource. With a WR, it almost seemed like a water resource type.
yes, you generally have to go into in person to MHC's offices to find those archaeological sites listed. But they were included. There are MHC's required distribution for all of these filings, so they did receive the full EE&F, and if they think it's significant, they'll submit comments on this project, which again will also be posted publicly with the certificate.
I just want to clarify on that though. So the dots that David was referring to are actually overlocated near Woodbury Pond. They're in that area there and they're shown on the map. Then on the dot, they define a rectangle around it, which appears to be just kind of arbitrary because they're both the same. And then a little portion of that rectangle crosses Boston Road onto our property out here on the edge of Boston Road. So that's why it technically falls within the Phase 1 project, but it doesn't look like, in our opinion, it doesn't look like it's anything to do with this parcel. But that's what has to be reviewed and commented on.
My first thought was it might have something to do with the old ice house. And the Woodbury Pond, which was dammed, I guess the term loosely, and made into a pond to cut ice back in 1800s. And the ice house was known to have been located on just on this side of Boston Road. So that was my first thought looking at that. But again, it was archaeological, which is generally below surface. So that's the only thing that messed with me a little bit. But
I might be able to give you some more information on that. Over there, I believe, was one of the first original proprietors' lots, right, Kate?
Somewhere in this vicinity.
Yeah. Well, my father told me it was over there, and one of the first settlers went to Marlborough to get supplies, and there was a big snowstorm. And if you read the town history, there was an Indian that saw smoke coming up through the snow and went and dug the woman out and saved her from, and that was across the street here.
But that was, I thought that was Marble Pond. Yeah, that's Marble Pond. So that wasn't this far down. Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, because we went over that with Dave LaValle. Yeah.
The site you indicated at the triangle, would that be near the power lines? And the two sites that you mentioned northerly, are they near power lines as well?
Yeah, I think one of them, this one, yes.
Yes.
And I think that's probably why it was
That's
picked up on a
exactly why, because
survey,
it's a mandate
archaeological survey
through,
that they had to
right,
do.
okay, so it's an old filing, okay.
Yeah.
But the ones up here,
It is. It's on the northern end of Lot 1.
which is near power lines? Yeah, okay, thank you. That explains why they did it, okay.
And just to be clear, when we say archaeological in Massachusetts, does it include cemeteries? Okay, so it's.
But cemeteries would typically be a historical. Yeah.
Well, it could
Not
be anything.
sure.
It could be, according to Mass Historic, it could be, would have to read their document, could be a burial,
Yeah.
could be a praying site, could be a fish weir, could be anything.
But you know where it is, right? So we can deal with that.
Mass Historic will be submitting a comment letter. I'm sure they're going to provide more information. That's like I said, they're kind of the keeper of the records on archaeological materials. So we're in the same boat, awaiting, what they're going to release about that.
Where is the Heritage Road neighborhood from where we're standing?
Well, generally up in that direction there.
I'm usually looking down, not up.
Yeah, generally in that direction over there. If you follow the two power lines where they converge, go another 1,000 feet beyond that, up on the hill, and that's where it is.
What is that road up there that you guys? There's a road up there on the hill. In front of a future building layout.
We don't have a road per se that I'm aware of. They went in and as part of like setting the restoration and clearing for preparation of some of the site prep
Up on
work.
the hill, way up on the hill next to the house.
Yeah, generally, but in the previously disturbed areas.
That wasn't previously disturbed. There used to be woods.
National Grid's also including the right of way, so we work on the power lines, so that may be a national grid actually.
We would assume the power lines are staying as they are now. They're not going to be submerged. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Power line. Thank you.
So that's all we really have from kind of a formal presentation. We're happy to walk around, look at anything, whatever everybody wants to do, or if there's more specific questions. I don't know if Eva from your side, if there's anything else we need to.
I guess just a couple things to note from what was discussed at the meeting on September 9th is that the stormwater management system that's been designed for this project has been sized to the 100-year storm using NOAA Atlas 14 precipitation data, which is generally more up to date and reflects more recent precipitation than the current stormwater standards for the state. And there's no alteration within the Zone 1 wellhead protection area that's located in the middle of the site. And there's also listed in the filing a previous underground storage tank that had leaked but has since been remediated, and all underground storage tanks on site have since been removed by the proponent. I think that more or less summarizes the questions from the previous meeting. Yeah, it was never even listed as an RCP site, which is a leak that has to be monitored over the long term. It was immediately remediated.
So are there any monitoring wells for this phase that have to be installed in order to ensure that nothing's leaching into the wellhead? Or is there anything that has to be done with regard to keeping an eye on anything going in that direction?
So from a local site plan review process going through for both Unified Parkway and for the Building 2 and 3 process, Wilkinsville Water District was obviously involved in this. They expressed some concerns relative to de-icing and salt because of the proximity to the Zone 1 and the Zone 2. So we made commitments to them that we would obviously not de-ice in these areas. The snow operations would be modified, and that's something that we worked through with the planning board with as exhibits that define the areas where a salt can and cannot be used on the property. As far as monitoring wells go, at the Wilkinsville Water District's request, we agreed to install 4 monitoring wells. 2 of them are specific to the Unified Parkway project, and they're at areas that are basically the, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically the spillways, basically, of the proposed, 2 of the 4 proposed detention basins that were proximate to the Zone 1. And then on buildings 2 and 3 here, on those local site plan approvals, we agreed to install 2 additional monitoring wells, again, proximate to 2 of the basins that are proximate to the Zone 1. And the intent, as I understand it from those, is that just to allow them to expand their ongoing monitoring that they do across their whole area of responsibility anyways. What they're monitoring and looking for,
Does that get put in before building starts? Or
they're going to be
after
going
building?
in within, the 4 of them are going to be hopefully in by the end of October. Yeah. We couldn't put them in now until we got, for Unified Parkway, we couldn't put them in until we could actually physically get to them because everything was, overgrown and whatnot.
There's also not going to be any refueling on site. Is what the,
Correct.
Yeah. So
And there's no refueling plan for the entire complete build out?
For this phase of the project now, for phase 1 project and for what will become building 2, no. For building 1, that's to be determined based on the tenant requirements. If there was, it would obviously be in compliance with Mass DEP, most likely an above ground storage tank, self-contained, double lined, meet all the criteria.
there's additional stormwater standards for sites that have refueling on site.
Does the scope of the NEPA review include traffic?
Yes.
What traffic data's been submitted? The same stuff that went to planning, or is there a different set of traffic?
There is a traffic study on phase 1 included in the expanded environmental notification form, expanded ENF filing. And again, I just want to note that anyone who hasn't received that yet, it is a public document and you're more than welcome to request that entire filing.
Has that traffic report been stamped? No?
It's been prepared by VHP as part of the NEPA filing.
So it hasn't been stamped? Isn't it a requirement that they submit stamped traffic reports by an appropriately licensed engineer?
We'll say that MassDOT also receives the filing and generally comments on the quality of the traffic study if there's an issue with it.
I would also add that on this specific project, because of all the discussions and the background of the project and all that has happened to date, Mass DOT specifically asked for a copy of the study, traffic study, to be submitted to them ahead of the filing, just because they did not want to have like a compressed review time and try to go through it quickly. So we actually submitted the traffic study to Mass DOT ahead of the actual filing, and then a copy of it was also included in the study.
so Mass DOT had, quite a bit of time
But
to.
none of it was stamped.
No, it's not a requirement under the MIPA regulations that any of the technical chapters be stamped. The consultants preparing these documents would be listed on the cover of the document, and the same study that's been submitted to the town has, I've submitted an attestation indicating that I've personally prepared the traffic study, and
But
it's the
still
same.
wasn't. I don't understand what the difficulty is with attaching a stamp to a document that we're all being relying on. I don't,
The document has,
philosophically, I just can't.
yeah, I think just on this point, the document is completely backed by VHB, a very reputable firm who is probably one or two firms who files MIPA projects for the most significant projects in the state. Their name is behind the report. MassDOT has reviewed it, and it hasn't been cited as an issue. It's a ministerial thing at this point. But the clear takeaway substantively is that MassDOT determined that at this phase of the project, there's no anticipated improvements that would require a MassDOT access permit. That's why we're in this review procedure that we've set out. In a future phase of the project, we do anticipate that traffic will get to a certain threshold where we will have to do some mitigation that's off-site and would require an access permit. And that's in a future phase, and MassDOT and obviously the town will have a full chance to review, comment, and make sure that the mitigation that's proposed is sufficient to deal with that.
I hope so, because the traffic right now coming out of Dudley Road is not good. I wait here for 10, 15 minutes just to pull out to get to my house, and it's only going to get worse.
And it will have to account for that. So.
Going out for lunch, not related to, it's just a comment.
So if you could clarify, so MEPA is reviewing the traffic report for the purpose of pollution control or emissions or?
Well, we do include traffic impacts, for example, one of the MIPA review thresholds is the creation of 3,000 new average daily trips.
Right.
And so we do look at both parking space creation, traffic creation. Generally, as far as the impacts and the content of the study, we defer to MassDOT in the same way as far as impacts to coastal dune. We defer to the Office of Coastal Zone Management. But we do also look at mobile source emissions as part of the overall impact from the project, in addition to the stationary emissions associated with the building.
And the stationary emissions on this building, own use, you don't anticipate a lot of idling, right? You don't anticipate a lot of truck idling, the trucks sitting at idle in your lots? Okay.
And I think, according to that traffic report, the daily truck traffic was 76 trucks a day.
74 to 76.
Yeah, 74
Trips.
per day.
In just building.
Trips.
It's trips, so it's unidirectional. So it wouldn't be 76 round trips. It would be 76 either on the road in either direction, entering or exiting the site.
Because that was one of the questions that asked me at the plot meeting. We asked, now that we know the number of bays and now that we know the number of turns, how many trucks a day, and apparently at that point that was not something that Unified was required to tell you. So that's actually in the new materials.
The truckers are identified in the traffic analysis in the EENF.
It's in the MIPA filing as well as in the local. It's the same study.
So we would
Same.
anticipate that when we do the next building and building one, that all of that detail would be at the same level of detail that we have now, right? Yeah, which is an improvement, because there was concerns over the number of, the days and everything.
Just one point of clarification, which I think we had put in a response letter, is that the number of truck trips didn't necessarily correlate to the number of loading bays in the building. So there are about 51 loading bays, I believe, for building 3. That doesn't mean that there's going to be all those or dictate how many daily trips. Correct. It does not mean that.
That was what the question was.
Yeah. And so.
Now we put a stake in the ground, 76.
Correct. That's what's been in the traffic study.
Or
for-
74, I guess. Sorry.
Right, it's-
Somewhere
it's
in the
that
70s.
order of magnitude, yes. I don't have the
So
reporting.
anything above that's going to require some data from that as it gets used and operated.
So the access permit, eventually when we do get the access permit from Mass DOT, there's a post-construction monitoring requirement. So yes, that's where we'll come back and look at actual counts for each of the buildings and make sure that the numbers are consistent with what's been permitted.
But that's a condition now of the planning board approval as well.
Right.
So the
Yeah,
conditions that we have.
It's not like, say, the number 74, if there's 75 on any given day, we don't go back and reinvent
Correct.
the wheel. There's a percentage, there's reasonableness. So, but yes, if it's 74 and all of a sudden there's 120
250,
trucks,
yeah.
then we've got to roll back and look at things. So, just to be clear.
So you went before the town to get buildings 2 and 3 all through all the local permitting and ordinances. And now going before MIPA, we're separating building 3 from building 2. So both have already met all the approvals. You've got all the conditions. When do you anticipate starting 2 if building 3 is going to finish in December of 23? And why aren't you having MIPA look at the combined properties that were already approved, as building 2 isn't necessarily conceptual because it's already went through the whole permitting process almost with the local jurisdiction?
When we start, as I stated in some of the planning board hearings as well, when we actually proceed with the construction of building 2 it's a business decision that's going to be, it's beyond my area to say when that's going to happen. That's going to be up to Unified to determine when that. But the immediate business needs that they have are to get building 3 constructed, as we've stated all along, and as part of the MIPA review process, knowing that process is a lengthy process to go through, especially when you're considering the full project as a whole. The phase 1 SRP process that we're focused on building 3 allows us to expedite that to meet our immediate needs for building 3. So
Would the combined building 2 and 3 have triggered a DOT highway access permit, given the difference in the traffic flow, if you combine those to the 1 million square feet
No.
and how many truck bays and the number of traffic?
No.
That was still under the DOT?
Yeah, the local traffic study actually looked at both buildings 2 and 3, and it went through the peer review process. Buildings 2 and 3 together also would not trigger the DOT access permit process. You would have to get into building 1, the final building.
So
Yeah.
to help us visualize just what the traffic impact is, now that we know we have 76, what would that represent on a daily basis? A 3-fold increase of trucks coming in, a 2-fold increase, a 0%, a 0 multiple increase? So today there's blank number of trucks that are making trips down Boston Road, right? We see them all the time at the lights. So when you add your truck trips to that, what is the multiple? Is it about 4 times as many trucks or 3 times as many trucks?
I don't have that comparison.
The study does break down the trips by turning movement in, I think, 4 or 5 different intersections. So you would be able to see that versus the morning traffic and evening peak hours, etc., and also weekday versus weekend.
I can't give you a precise number, but every single day of the week, I'm out, I do my walk with my dog at 6 o'clock in the morning, and on average, on any given day, I see 6 to 8 Unified trucks. Because don't forget, they have a warehouse
Correct.
down on
Yeah.
Providence Road.
Yeah.
So a couple of trucks go that way, 1 or 2 go back.
Yeah.
And that's in the span of an hour.
Okay.
So if they're talking 76 over the course of a day, I don't foresee there being much
Well-
difference other than those of us who are down that part of town who are not going to get impacted.
But if it's a
Those
steady
who are
rate,
on this
that's-
side, yeah, but if it's the same consistent flow, it might not be an issue.
I think you're right.
Trucks that would be going to those 2 facilities now are going to utilize Unified Parkway to get to those facilities. So it's even less traffic on.
But it will concentrate the diesel emissions, right? Because all of your other locations, trucks there, now you're bringing them all here. So that's my only question, is it increasing the emissions in this area? I don't know the answer, that's your job. Maybe not, maybe so. I'll ask you to look at it.
Something we may look at because there's also environmental justice considerations for this project. There are a couple of communities within 1 mile and additional ones within 5 mile. And at a certain point of diesel truck trips, we ask proponents to consider where those are being concentrated if they're in environmental justice populations. But that's only over if there's more than 150 truck trips per day. So that's not something we would necessarily, well, I don't expect to ask for phase 1, but maybe considered in the, when you're looking at the cumulative impact, the cumulative filing down the road.
Just standing here, like if it's 48, 6 bucks an hour in the morning, and it's an 8-hour day, that's almost almost 50 and we're at 75, so we're at 125 already. So you're brushing up against that good threshold. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, we understand. You've been very honest with us about telling us we're maximizing the purpose, and we know you're consolidating. We're just trying to get a sense of the scope, of the order of magnitude. I really like this, by the way.
And the phase 1 building, when completed in December of 23, will be 24/7 right from the get-go, or will it growing to a 24/7 operation? As far as building 3, how long before it's running 24 hours a day
From the get.
from the get-go?
But as we stated, though, the majority of the operations are occurring in that first shift period. So the overnight is, moving product around, getting it ready for the next morning type thing inside the building.
Yeah, I'll start with a nice comment first. I like that you are going to protect this. I agree. Huge site impact is lessened by that. But I am going to be that annoying customer. I can't get through my head that we're doing building 1 traffic study with 100 and whatever trucks coming through, and he wrote up a plan. Does that not include building 2 would be a question you don't have to ask yet for truck traffic. And if it doesn't, and he writes a new one for building 2 with building 1 that still doesn't trigger a dot checkout, my question is, and I'm not like putting anyone on the spot, but if I have to build a carport and I need certified plans with a stamp, that the building inspector says I need something to hang my hat on, why can't he certify the plans, stamp them, so that if the town has an issue, they can hang their hat on him?
The plans are
No, he said they're not.
The study itself.
No, he
is
said
the sign. Because that's the industry standard.
I understand that,
It's as
but-
strong as a stamp. His signature on that traffic study is as strong as a stamp.
It just seems like there's more regulation for me to put up a carport because I need to pay $3 grand for this little plan that gets a stamp on snow that's 50 pounds on the ground, but I don't need a plan stamp for 200 trucks going in and out of here. That's why I'm the annoying customer. And one more thing, you would never submit a document to the court without your board number on there, your bar number, because that's a requirement.
And that's,
Okay, thank you.
his stamp number's in the study. It's just
I can't
not
get out of my
around
head.
the
It just seems a little strange.
Yeah, I don't.
But go ahead. Someone's going to comment.
He does sign this, the recorder signed, his license number is on there, so
Okay.
it's in effect the same stamp. It's
All
just
right.
not the physical stamp.
And
He's
as-
standing behind the report
Okay.
as a professional
All right.
engineer.
That gives me some explanation. Okay. Thank you.
And the monitoring required at the end would include the entirety of the build out, not just building
Okay,
1 and
so
2.
it's not just on one, it's the two.
No, it would be the entirety.
All right. I have a better understanding.
And if I could
I'm a
just,
happy customer.
everyone's referenced these a couple of times here. The only thing I'll point out that I'm not 100% certain on yet is because of for those that are familiar with the Unified Parkway and the Boston Road intersection, we were asked to shift the alignment of the road to avoid the sycamore tree. In order to shift that, we had to shift the entire road this way. So it's now coming closer. So these trees here will definitely remain. Some of those trees over there may have to come down because of that realignment of the road to avoid the sycamore tree. So I would just want to point that out.
Let me ask you something about the water. I assume studies have been done how much water you're going to use. And what happens if everything is built and then the well pumps start to fail and they can't get water? Is that in the future to think about?
So in terms of our discussion, so we have coordinated with the Wilkinsonville Water District. And for projects like this, you start off with an initial point of figuring out what your water demand is. First of all, these uses are extremely low intense uses. And because we don't have cafeterias, we don't have, there's no production, there's no manufacturing that requires the use of water. It's a warehouse. It's a dry goods warehouse, basically. So to put a marker on it, we use the industry standard and the design practices to use the Title V requirements, which are really what are generating for septic design. But if you think about it, in a standalone system, the two are linked because generation of water ultimately goes no septic. Well, in any event, in this use, it's 15 gallons per day per employee. So we know the employee projections, so that's how we backed into what the projected use is. But the reality is, if you stop and think about it, so for building 3, it's 525 gallons a day is the projected use. That's all it is. It's not a lot. It's not a significant volume. And building 2 is, I think, maybe 22 or 2,300 gallons per day. And that's extremely conservative because when you think about it, the only uses that are going in there are bathrooms, and for the most part, so with a low flush toilet less than a gallon, you'd be flushing the toilet 14, 15 times a day to get to that number as one employee. So the likelihood of that is very low.
But the other thing is, see, I've been in town quite a bit, and they were doing some blasting on Harkness Road, put in a water line. And I swear, can we prove it? I swear that my well suffered. Down 186 feet, and I just feel that something happened with the blasting. Now all the stuff you go in here and all the trucks and moving and all this, it's not going to affect you. I don't know how deep they are, these wells, and what happens in the future. How is the town, Wilkinsonville Water, going to prove, we'll say you get everything done, and all of a sudden, oh, one of the wells failed or something like that. Is there something in there to protect the water department? Or they have to prove that it was all the buildings that caused it, or how does that work?
Well, I think that the question presupposes or implies that it's because of this development, right? So I don't know the age of that well. I don't know what condition it's in. We have been coordinating with them to the extent that our project has been approved. It's been reviewed. It's been reviewed by Wilkinsonville's own engineer as well. So they've done their own separate peer review. I'll point out on the stormwater that at their request, we actually infiltrated the 100-year storm, which is very unusual for most projects. These soils out here are extremely good. They're sand, so they generally perk very, very well. Again, that was at their request to recharge the aquifer in this area. So it goes to show you the level of confidence they have in our stormwater management, how we're pre-treating everything if we're putting it right back into the aquifer. But as an added precautionary measure, we agreed to those 4 monitoring wells I talked about as well, right? So that's part of their due diligence they do anyways now as part of their overall program, is to just continue to monitor those. And if something were to be generated on our site, our system has been designed with, John, correct me if I'm misstating this, but they're backflow, they're basically valves. So God forbid there is a localized containment or a spill, these valves can be shut off and all the stormwater stops going out. It doesn't have a chance to infiltrate into anywhere until it's contained and treated and addressed. Again, that was at the request of the Wilkinsonville Water District. So we've done everything we can, we feel anyways, to avoid, minimize, and mitigate any of the impacts associated with that.
That's accurate. 2 related questions to that. The timing seems great. The proprietary storm scepter type units are not referenced in your stormwater management section in here, probably because this might have been filed before we kind of pinned those down and agreed to those. Is that because there aren't any storm scepters on the building 3 site because it's really not right up against the zone 2, zone 1 yes, but zone 2? Or if there are storm scepters, why would you not reference them in the plan, because that's a benefit, and are you going to add those in so we can make sure that the MIPA document is consistent with the planning board document? And then I have one on construction, so I'll let you go to that one first.
So there are water quality units proposed. We did that to go above and beyond based on the comments that we had. And frankly, I don't think we needed them, but we did do that. We didn't specify a brand. We specified a TSS removal. So the contractor can pick whichever one kind of worked best, but they are proposed on the plan with the TSS removal associated with it.
The narrative just talks about deep sump structures and stuff. It doesn't talk about the commercial proprietary, these kind of units.
I could double check that and clarify that.
Double check that. I just want to make sure what is on file with MIPA is making that same above and beyond commitment that we asked you to make and that you did make.
Jen, just to clarify too, the phase 1 site, building 3, is, I think 99% of it is outside of the zone 2. I think just that the entrance of the common driveway is where it crosses
right.
it.
And so that was kind of one of my questions, but I believe Graves' comments were also, if a basin, water comes off a site into a basin, and then that basin ultimately ends up inside the zone 1 or 2, that all of that needs to be treated in that increased manner. The other thing I did not see was the special conditions we placed about certain things you need to use to reduce construction noise in terms of certain types of mufflers and low volume construction building methods. That's also not referenced in your MIPA document, and I just wondered why that wasn't referenced, and if we could, I don't know if you can add reference at that point or just acknowledge that. I will, of course, as Eva's pointed out 82 times, do the preferred thing and put these comments in writing, so they are on the record and can be addressed. But I just wanted to ask you that question.
Yeah, I think when we filed MIPA August 15th, we were still in our appeal period for all the local approvals. But I think, Eva, it may help if would you like to get copies of all the local approvals, just so you see some of these conditions?
Yeah, sure, that would be fine. And
Yeah,
then
I'll
it
actually
just add
include
it.
that with my written comments, the actual approval letter. All right, and I know what might, just from my own perspective, the thing that was not confusing necessarily to me, because I've seen these a million times, but to anybody who's just looking at these for the first time, is, as I think Christine pointed out, locally we had kind of two phases, building 2 and 3 and building 1. And that's how we approved them. And now, for your operational and getting up and going faster purposes, we have just building 3 that's the subject of this. And then if they want to move forward with buildings 1 or 2, they're going to have to do additional findings. So, and that, you saw that in the traffic as well. If you look at the traffic in the MIPA filing, it's not apples to apples with our filing, because it's 1 building instead of 2 buildings, but I ran the numbers and they're very reasonable, and it's based on a 340 and a 650,000 square foot building, 1408 trips a day versus 480 trips a day. It's reasonable, the scale down and the number of truck trips. So I didn't have any concerns with the traffic, but I wanted to make sure that those proprietary stormwater units are in there, and that the construction noise mitigation is definitely part of the MIPA consideration.
I do look at construction period impacts, so that's a valid thing to include as far as comments.
Yeah, and just a reminder too, so when we go back, what's going to happen next in terms of our MIPA process is the secretary will issue a certificate for this special review procedure, which is we're using for a phased project like this. It's going to set forth all what we've done and filed for building 3, the initial phase, and that we've satisfied our review requirements by filing the expanded ENF, which we did. It'll also set forth what needs to happen for the future phase or phases. So if we wanted to come back, depending on timing, if we're coming back for building 2, we'll have to go back before MIPA, resubmit the same type of studies that we had to do for building 3, with respect to GHG emissions, air pollution, things like that. And the studies will be cumulative because this is a total project we're looking at. So the timing of that, again, we're not sure exactly when. I think business needs will probably drive a lot of that. It also might be that we do lock down a tenant for building 1, and so then we're going back and we're doing, the rest of the project all at the same time. Where again, we're looking at all of the cumulative impacts at that time, not just the next buildings, but building 3 and the others that come along. So I just want to make sure that that's the state process, and the environmental impact studies that have to be done because of the scale of this project are fairly rigorous and take time. We were able to do it for building 3 because it is the smallest of the 3 buildings, but this will be a months-long process on the most expedited schedule if everything goes correctly. But we're here and kind of went over what the phase 1 project is, and hopefully have satisfied what MIPA needs to see in other conversations we've had with key stakeholders, and you all. And I think that as we go into the next phases, I think there'll probably be similar public outreach as there was today.
So Eva, with regard to the Unified Parkway, I think in the Zoom meeting you mentioned something about the parkway was only being constructed up to the access to make Building 3 accessible. Is that still true? Did the parkway have to go through any kind of MEPA or no? Or can they finish it and tar it and have the egress out on Providence Road, even if only Building 3 Phase 1 is completed? Can they complete the parkway?
I would say that I'm not sure if it's the access. I think it's the entirety of the roadway that's being constructed, but the impacts associated with that, as far as the intersections that were included in the study and the impervious surface, are reflected in that filing as part of Phase 1. So that impervious surface creation and the associated stormwater are included in this filing.
Right. And before we're the reason the Phase 1 project, it triggers MEPA from an impact standpoint because of impervious areas we're creating. So, and that includes not just the Phase 1 building and the parking lots and trailer spots, but also the roadways. So, prior to putting in any impervious areas, we have to make sure that we have completed the MEPA process for that, for this phase, and that's what we're doing now.
Sorry, I didn't hear the answer. So Unified Parkway to Providence Road will be completed in a connection with Building 3?
The way the filing is set up, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we've prorated it basically, right? Because the road services the entire project area,
Right.
so it's been prorated to each of the lots. So when you look at it, so whether it's lot 3, lot 2, or lot 1, the impacts associated with the roadway, which is primarily impervious, has been proportioned to each lot. In the case of lot 3, we went up to the common driveway.
That's not
Yeah.
the question. The question is, are you going to finish the roadway end to end before you open up the
Because that would be an incredible help to that intersection, even if only one building is open, to have the ability
Yes,
to go off
the goal is to try to get the roadway constructed as quickly as possible.
and down completely.
Yes.
Yeah, and then just allocate the cost to the other units as they come online.
environmental.
Or the environmental.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Good hearing.
Yeah, they're
Sorry, the window's picking up as well.
Part of our local approval requires that the road be accessible to get. Great sidewalk.
on Sunday. Yeah. So, the town granted a TIF to the 3 buildings. Buildings 1, 2, and 3. The project itself, and at the time the TIF was submitted, the narrative was that Building 1 was the first to be constructed, which is the largest building. The marketplace has obviously changed, and the intent now is to move ahead with Building 2, but the intent, or Building 3, but the intent of the developer is to build out the entire project as soon as the market allows. As part of the MEPA review, is there a process where you try and look at the forest through the trees? You know what I'm saying? Where you take a look at even though we're just focused on an exercise of Phase 1, do you take a step back and say, based on data that however you come up, we have a use and we have a size, right? So modeling traffic is, for discussion purposes, is not difficult to do. Is part of this process looking at trying to get a look at more of the macro impact of the master development, or are you just try and stay focused on a small piece of it?
This particular filing is primarily just focused on Phase 1, but the future filing, the future filing won't just focus, there'll be a lot more detail on the buildings that are being reviewed at that time, but the impacts will be reviewed cumulatively. And as far as mitigation commitments, we are looking at that same cumulative impact. So it won't be piecewise by the time it finishes review. But at this point, that is what the draft SRP has been crafted for, is to allow this initial phase to proceed with all impacts thoroughly evaluated for that phase while an additional filing will be required for the rest of the build out. And there is sort of conceptual discussion of that, but the understanding and the information that has been submitted to the NEPA office is that that building can change and is not, you know, some of it is if and or when, where the actual impacts may change and whether or not it's constructed may change. So that's why we're not evaluating it right now, because there isn't the detail that we require for NEPA available.
Considering the potential impact of the intersection of Walton Road and 146, and any solution to that is going to take however much time it takes to redesign a state road, a decade, right?
Well,
Would it make sense maybe at this point, so knowing that with buildings 2 and 3, as I recall, the volume of capacity at certain times of the day at that intersection was 99%. So to assume that building 1, the larger of the buildings, is going to result in that far exceeding volume to capacity, wouldn't it make sense to try and create an alignment of a critical path of a process that, so the town's not sitting with a non-functioning intersection for 6 years?
Well, it will be required to be reviewed prior to being constructed, and we do include mitigation, and MassDOT ties mitigation commitments to their permits. And a part of that filing, as far as those, they're referred to as Section 61 because it's the part of the law that established those findings, but those Section 61 findings, which are essentially mitigation commitments, proponents are required to identify when those will be enacted and who's responsible for it. So that will be included in that future review when you would anticipate those impacts on local intersections from that larger build-out. If that's, sorry, it's kind of a long answer.
Have you ever turned down an approval because the intersection doesn't work?
Well, I guess, to reiterate, NEPA is not an approval process.
Right, but does that ever happen?
I would assume that MassDOT can and possibly has denied access permits.
Or they'll require mitigation that the developer then can't afford or doesn't do. So the project gets scaled down or eliminated. So yes, I've seen that happen in my own career.
So our
But would the project not be built until the mitigation
Yeah,
was
if
conducted?
they issue a Section 61 finding that requires mitigation before they open the doors, they gotta finish it or they can't open the doors.
But is the intersection of Boston Road and 146 necessarily their issue, right? Or is
Well,
that
it's not
a state issue
entirely,
or a
no,
town
it's not
issue?
entirely their issue, but they might be the unlucky people who
fall
push it
into
over the
it.
cliff, and if they are, they're gonna get stuck with the improvement costs. And they're not gonna be able to open until they do that. We saw this when I was the planner in Sturbridge with the Walmart project. We had a Section 61 finding for improvements, over $6 million in 1990 something, as far as 6 miles away from the project site, and they couldn't open their door until every single one of them was done because of their Section 61 finding.
Jen, 223, we couldn't open till the deceleration lane.
Yeah, that's true. On 223.
They could not move in.
Yeah.
Where they
Yeah,
are now, they
Section
couldn't move
61
in.
findings
So
are
they get,
But I guess I do want to note that just mitigation is focused on project-associated impacts, not necessarily existing issues with the traffic.
right, and that's why the town's already sat down with Barry Lorien at District 3, noting all of these projects that are cropping up in every town all around us, and that there's a cumulative effect. Even if individually Building 3 doesn't do stuff, Building 3 that's not doing stuff immediately, along with Building X in Uxbridge and Z in Grafton, they have a cumulative effect. And Barry Lorien has already agreed to work with the town to push at the state level for Rhode Island state line all the way to Mass Turnpike in-depth study of Route 146, all the oncoming impacts and what the state in particular needs to get going on now, so we're not holding a really not nice situation as we move forward, because it's just a reality. I mean, the background growth we talk about of 1% and 2%, it's a big number. That number grows every single year.
And
So-
an individualized basis, it's small
Right.
and accumulative.
So we're trying to handle with our regional planning agency and our district highway kind of that broader picture. But this project may get stuck depending on the timing of if they sign building one tenant and show they've tripped all of these warrants for lights and things with a chunk of that cost. But that's the cost of things. So.
I'll take the spotlight off of you guys, this fine gentleman from MassDOT. Is there any impact that you have seen from this, or that you guys are trying to pry a plan so that that intersection, I know approximately 12 years ago there was talk of a flyover. Right, I know, I hate to be the guy that brings up all the nasty stuff, but you know, that's just the result of it, and I know that there was some intersection issues there. Is MassDOT kind of doing the 6 Ps, if you know what I'm talking about from the military, right? Are they going to kind of just step forward and say, okay, we got to do something now before, if it isn't them, and it's Toys R Us comes in here with a new company, someone, are they looking to pry a plan?
Well, some are working with the proponents in conjunction as we move forward. Right now, it's not totally clear what the impact's going to be. Okay. So as they move forward with it, and it starts to become more clear, we'll work with them on making sure that this is a solution that does work and is going to be, you know, equitable for the area. We've had other projects in other areas that we said that mitigation is required, and they just weren't accepting that, and they've let them walk away. You know, there's sometimes where we just have to meet a certain level of mitigation based on the impacts to make it palatable for us to include.
So is the answer we don't know yet, and so we just got to take the risk?
Right. Well, right now at this junction, we're at phase 1, just to do a small portion of the project. The grand scheme with the full build out is a much larger impact. And that's where we come into play in reviewing, and then they have to come to Mass Highway for an access permit, where we do our review.
Right. And if they say it needs X mitigation and you're not willing to do it, they walk away, they scale down. Right. And in the meantime, we may get ahead of it with our work with our regional planning agency and District 3
that's the risk
and the state.
mitigation, isn't it? Because we know it's going to happen.
Yeah. Time marches on. Background growth is
here to stay.
constant.
Yeah.
So just so I know I walk away today, building 1 and building 2 are something that's not going to trip anything that gets Mass DOT involved. Is that where I'm hearing right? I'm sorry, building 3 and building 2, my mistake.
Building
My mistake.
3
building
is the
3 here
yeah.
and building 2 over there is not enough to trip Mass
Well,
DOT, correct?
I
Is that
mean,
what I'm
building
hearing?
3 is the only one ahead of NEPA right now.
Okay.
So building 1 and 2 will have to go through NEPA review prior to construction. And
Reviewed on so far is just to say that they're outside of state on this part of the project.
I understand. All right. See? Thank you.
sorry, just before anyone walks away, Joyce Smith brought up Novak no show. Looks like we've already paid her. I just want to double check your email addresses so I don't get them wrong.
Novak left.
Okay.
I probably have his though, so I don't know what it is.
The issue. I think I've got his. I just want to make sure it's 13 Dill, Earhill Farm. But I do have his website and a scene, so maybe there's an address on that. But in any case, if you haven't heard from me by October 4th, please feel free to reach out and I can send you a link to that just in case I got your email address wrong. But anyone who wrote down their email address today, I will notify you when the certificate and also the SRP are posted to the Environmental Monitor.
And this is mostly for you two, if you don't mind. Since there is an archaeological impact, which may not really be one, but because we don't really know what it is, because no one extracting that information is pretty difficult. But with that said, is there any way the Historic Commission can be on that notification chain?
Yeah, did you put your thing on?
I put my personal address and my personal email.
If you put the Historical Commission's email address, I can include that on it as well. I will say that when there are, which I really can't say for this project in particular, especially for phase 1, but when we have seen projects that have archaeological impacts, or at least MHT is concerned that there are, you usually have to do something along an archaeological survey before you can break down. So
I just want
break
to be in
ground.
that chain. That's the problem.
Right. But MHC will identify if there are any concerns with that.
Thank you.
Well, this is being recorded, how can I view it?
It'll be on the local cable access stations as well as the Town of Sutton Cable's YouTube channel. So if you've ever watched Does Jen have your email?
I think she would.
If you just, when
Jen-
we're done here, I'll get your email and I'll send you a link.
Are there any other questions at this point? And I just want to reiterate that the comment period deadline is this Friday, and those can be emailed directly to me or through the MEPA public comment portal, but it's probably going to be easier to email them directly to me, to be honest. There's a lot of problems with the comment portal at times. All right, thank you all very much for coming out, and if there are any other questions at any course of this review, please feel free to email me directly, and I'll try and answer those to the best of my ability.